Disaster struck the Santa Clarita Valley on March 12, 1928. At 3 minutes before midnight, William Mulholland's monumental St. Francis Dam collapsed. 13 billion gallons of LADWP water crashed down San Francisquito Canyon. By the time the floodwaters reached the Pacific Ocean at Ventura, at least 450 people were dead. Half of the children in Saugus Elementary School were never seen again. The question that still nags historians nearly 8 decades later, did it have to happen? I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History, brought to you by the Santa Clarita Valley Historical Society and Time Warner Cable. Hetta Laurena Carter was 18 years old when she visited the St. Francis Dam in 1928, shortly before it collapsed. She's here tonight to share her story and some photographs that could shed some light on who knew what and when they knew it. Laurena, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And with us also is a man who is normally behind the camera by day, but in his spare time has made a hobby of studying the history of the St. Francis Dam disaster. Keith Buttelman, thank you too for joining us.
Nice to be here.
Now, Laurena, where in 1928 were you living?
I was living in Hawthorne, California. I went to school in Englewood.
Okay.
And Hawthorne was about the end of the old streetcar.
Okay. But
I
you
lived
used
on
to
162nd Street.
And you used to come out here, out to Saugus?
Well, I came out here, I don't know, just on the spur of the moment to have a picnic.
Did you often have picnics out here, out in the woods?
It was the only time I ever had a picnic out here.
Okay.
And I came out with a couple of friends, and we sat down beside the little creek and had our lunch.
And this is in San Francisquito Canyon?
Yes, right.
Now, when was this?
Beg pardon?
When was this?
It was end of February, which would make me about 18 years old.
Okay.
And I think that I had been driving for a while, and it was just fun to drive. My dad had an old Chevy, and I drove the old Chevy all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And as I sat there, I wondered what in the world they were doing up on the corner of the dam, because my father was a cement contractor. And I thought, that looks like cement up there. And I walked a little closer, and there was a half a sack of cement in the mortar box. The box also held a wooden hoe and a bucket and the tip of the garden hose. The hose was down the side of the dam. So I immediately guessed that they were making sloppy cement in the mortar box and pouring it down the hose to leak a small leak that was on the side of the dam, which was about halfway down the dam.
Now, this is the end of February 1928, so just literally a few weeks before the dam did
That's
break.
Right. Now,
were you alone there?
Beg pardon?
Were you with anybody? Were you or just out here by yourself?
No, I was with several people. There were 3 or 4 of us having a picnic.
Okay.
But they're long gone.
Now, you said your father was a cement contractor, but he didn't work on the dam.
No, he did not. No. It was only because he was a cement contractor that I recognized the tools that were on the top of the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the first thing I noticed was the mortar box, which years ago, that's what they used the hoe to mix up the cement for the topping of any job that my dad was doing.
Now, you took some photographs, and this photograph here, you were up on top of the dam, more or less, at least, when you took that photograph.
No, I wasn't on top of the dam. I was alongside the dam.
Okay.
And I only walked up a ways on the dirt to take that picture.
Okay. So could you see how much water was in the dam at the time?
No, I would have no idea how much water was in the dam.
Okay.
No.
You've got another photo that you took. You took this photo also of the water in the dam?
Yes.
When was that photo taken? Was it?
It was the same time as the photo was taken of the
other one, of them with the cement thing with the hose hanging down.
Yeah, with the hose on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the same time.
So, this is the end of February 1928, 3 weeks or so before the dam broke. What, Keith, tell me, what are these photos mean to you? What do they tell you?
Well, the main thing is that the timing of it. Through the inquest, Mulholland and Van Norman both testified that there was no indication that there was any problem on the dam, even the day of. They were called, Tony Arnerschweiger, as a matter of fact, called both of them up.
He's the dam keeper.
He was the dam keeper, because there was a new leak on the western abutment, and it was showing it was muddy. And that means that it would have been undercutting the dam, which could lead to the failure. So Van Norman and Mulholland both drove up to the dam site, arriving around 10:30 in the morning, inspected the leak on the western side.
Morning, what morning?
March 12, 1928, the day of the failure, and reported that the water was clear coming out from underneath the structure, which would mean just it's a harmless leak. Also, what was noticed that day was a new leak on the eastern side, which is the side Lorena is talking about, the eastern abutment. And that did also occur, a small leak on the eastern side.
So there were leaks, but they were saying it wasn't a problem?
That's correct. They were saying that they weren't undercutting the dam, they were just leaks off of hard rock. Mulholland, as a matter of fact, stated all dams leak. A leak isn't really a bad thing unless it's undercutting, unless it's taking material away from the foot underneath the dam, the footing. That's when the problems arise in a concrete dam. Mm-hmm. Now, in an earthen dam, obviously, if you got a leak, it's a little more of a problem, but in a concrete structure.
Now, Lorena, when you were there, you saw what appeared to be these workmen. They would have been filling these cracks in the dam. Did you actually see leaking in the dam at the time?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. What did it look like?
Well, I would say the leakage was no bigger than my thumb, maybe a little smaller, and it was trickling down the side of the dam into the dirt and on down. And I don't think that it was turned into the little creek that was there. Now, I did have pictures of that creek, but they were very, very funny because I was wading in the water in the creek and I had my dress all rolled up. And years ago, I threw it away because I thought it was terrible.
Oh, well.
But I was close enough when I was wading in the creek that I could look up and see the water coming out.
Okay.
And it didn't seem like it was very big. My guess was it was about like my thumb. Now, I'm just guessing because that's so long ago that some of the particulars
Yeah, can you tell me if it was on the right side or the left side as you're looking at it?
It's on the right side of the dam, halfway up.
Okay, and was it right up against the mountain or was it just on the face of the dam?
It was right up against the dam.
It was right on the face of the dam?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Right on the edge of the dam.
Now, isn't that one of the places where the dam broke?
Well, the theory, the eastern side causing the failure. Mm-hmm. Right, there is no one knows for sure, there isn't total fact. Nobody survived who saw the dam fail, so we can't say for certain that it failed on the eastern or western side. The state of California had a theory that it failed the western side at the fault line. on the western abutment. J. David Rogers, who's a dam engineer, he did done a lot of research on it, and his theory was a failure on the eastern abutment, and which is the theory I go along with. And so yes, the theory is there was a small blowout down the dam, probably halfway to 2/3 of the way down, which undercut the eastern abutment, the hillside, triggering a landslide that took out the eastern side of the dam. Simply put. So yes, that is one of the theories, that the eastern side failed first.
Did you just see the one leak?
Only the one leak, yes, sir.
Okay. Was it all these cracks, or was it a number of leaks that made it break, or was it something else?
Well, basically, it was geology that killed the St. Francis. The eastern side of the dam was on a shale, which is very, fractured. Also, the whole eastern side of that hillside was an ancient landslide that had taken place, millennia ago. And actually, there was an earthen dam that plugged that whole area up, creating a lake larger than the reservoir of the St. Francis or anything else, and it eventually was eaten away. So the structure, the hillside itself was unstable. And when that is one of the reasons that if you ever see a picture of the St. Francis, of the hillside where the landslide took place, the slide actually occurred 50 to 100 feet above the top of the St. Francis. And as a matter of fact, that's what took out the power lines that that designated the time of the failure at 11:57:30. That's when the power lines were cut.
Okay.
I have a question. It was very odd that the middle of the dam was still standing when I went back. Why would all that pressure and not take the middle of the dam out?
Well, there were cracks in the face of the dam. There were 4 large cracks, contraction cracks from the original pouring. When they poured the St. Francis, they didn't know that Portland cement, the concrete they used, generates its own heat when it's poured in large sections. So as the dam cured, 4 large cracks appeared, 2 in the center section that went alongside that one piece that remained standing after the failure, plus 2 on the abutments. Now those were filled in 27 with oakum, which is basically wedges of oak, and with grout. So theory being, when the dam failed, when the eastern side failed because of the landslide, the dam then started to shift towards the east because there was no longer a structure there separating it from the western side, and it failed along those 2 existing cracks in the center section of the dam.
You talked about seeing what you called sloppy cement. What is sloppy cement?
Sloppy cement is, let's say, a half a sack of cement to a bucket of water, or 2/3 of a bucket of water, and take a hoe and mix it up. And that's what they were doing, because I could tell that they were using sloppy cement, otherwise it wouldn't go down in the hose.
Okay, so just a very liquid cement. Did you see them?
Yeah, it had to be liquid to go down into the hose. They couldn't put anything that was real heavy in there. There was no sand or gravel. I think it was strictly cement. And I didn't see any sand or gravel or any sacks of it, but I did see the cement, and I did see that they had a bucket and a hoe, and that they were mixing up sloppy cement, I called it.
And one of the reasons I ask that is, I mean, I go up to what's left of the dam, and I see it looks like a bunch of it looks like they just took a bunch of whatever was around, smooth rocks and all sorts of things, and just threw it together and built the dam out of a bunch of stuff that was just there. And so was the composition of the dam itself a problem?
Well, Mulholland always stated that the concrete was of acceptable quality. They would bring in the cement and they would use the rocks from the existing creek base. It would theoretically be washed and then mixed with the concrete. So you will find the rocks in the concrete, like normally we look for gravel or something like that when you buy a sack of concrete at the hardware store. Well, they took the rocks from the existing creek bed, saved them money. Part of the problem with the mixing of the concrete, though, they found with the St. Francis, because Mulholland said it was of average strength. Tests have said it was a little weak. They used what's called a batch plant, which if you ever see a picture of the construction, you'll see there's a structure with a long tube-like coming off of it. And it's basically they mix the concrete there, pump it up this tube or pipe, and then it would be distributed higher up into the dam. But as it was being done, the aggregate or the rocks would separate from the cement, thus causing a weaker structure. Was that weaker cement? Was that responsible for the failure? Probably not. I mean, it's accepted that the strength of the concrete was not responsible for the failure, that it was the geology of the area.
Laurena is saying that they're using this just cement and water mixture. Is that sufficient to plug a leak?
Well, I'm not an expert. That's something a engineer would have to answer. I don't know.
Since my dad was in cement,
Yeah.
I looked at it and I thought, they'll never get a leak stopped with that sloppy cement.
Well, that's what I wanted to know. What did you think? What did this mean
That's
to you
what I
when you saw
thought
it?
when I saw it.
Well, when you saw this, what did it mean to you? Did you say, boy, they have a big problem and that's going to break? or
No,
what?
I never thought about the dam breaking. It never entered my mind whatsoever. And of course, 4 or 5 or 6 days later, when I heard about it, I was shocked. And right away I thought, oh, I wonder if that leak caused the dam to break. But I had no idea. And I did think that it was not a smart move to make, putting sloppy cement where there was water coming out.
Yeah. How's it going to hold? Now, how soon after the dam break did you come back and visit?
As soon as the roads let me go back.
Oh, really? So
Oh,
what
yeah.
month would that have been?
Oh, yeah, because I thought, oh, my God, this has happened right after we were there.
How
and
many
the
weeks
dam is
later?
gone?
How many weeks later do you think it was when you came
Oh,
back?
I don't think it was weeks. I just think it was, I think maybe it was 6 or 7 days after I was there that the dam went out.
Right, but I mean, how soon after that did you come back and visit? After it broke?
My guess would be about 5 days,
Okay.
because for a while you couldn't get through on the roads.
Describe for me what you saw.
What I saw when I went back,
5 days after the dam broke.
I stood there and looked at that hunk in the middle, and I thought, good grief, both sides of the dam is gone, and here's this piece in the middle. I just was amazed. I couldn't believe that it had happened.
What about the destruction that you saw on the way?
I didn't see much because they wouldn't let me on the roads.
How did you get there then?
Well, I went some back roads and in and out.
Came up and around it?
Yeah, in and out. And I thought, well, I'm going to take a picture of the piece that's standing, which is there in the bunch of pictures. But no, most of the roads were closed for quite a long time. But I kind of went in the back way and knew my way around, and I left the car on the side of the road and walked down and took a picture of the part that was standing.
Did you know people who died?
Did I know anyone that died? No.
No.
I didn't know a soul. No.
In one of these pictures, it shows some cars. There's the piece that was standing, and this says it says on the back of it, April 8, 1929. So just about a year afterward. Is that one of the pictures that you took?
Yes, but I can't vouch about the date on it at all.
Do you have any idea what those cars are doing?
No, I can't tell you.
That piece that was standing then, if you were there on April 8, 1929, that was just before it was dynamited, I guess.
Yeah, that was before they dynamited the center, yeah.
Yeah. When did they dynamite the center and why?
Well, the center was dynamited, I believe it was in 1929. The exact date, I'm a little unsure of. It is in a record. The DWP said for two reasons. One was safety. A young man had been killed on the face of the dam about 6 months earlier. And the DWP said they didn't want people to have to be reminded of it. So it was dynamited, A, for safety, and B, to try to start to bury the memory of it. Because not only the center structure was dynamited, but a lot of the larger blocks downstream were dynamited and reduced to rubble, and actually tried to contour to look like what the rest of the area looks like. And that's why you don't see any of the large blocks down there today. There's only one block intact down there.
Now, if you were living in Hawthorne, Inglewood area, how big a deal was this at the time? Outside of, I'm curious to know, you didn't live in the Santa Clarita Valley, but in outside areas in greater Los Angeles, what was the reaction to the dam disaster?
When the dam broke? Personally, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. That big hunk of cement broke. I mean, it was just, to me, it was unbelievable. I was shocked, and I couldn't believe it.
Were people in Los Angeles talking about it? And
well, I heard it over the radio that it had broke. And of course, right away I thought, oh, I'll go back and see for myself. But I had to wait because most of the roads in that area were closed. But as soon as I could get in there, I went in and I took a picture of the piece that was standing in the middle.
Right. Anything you want to ask our guest while she's our captive audience here?
No, I guess, as I said, the main questions she's answered, which is the time at which the photographs were taken. I mean, that's one of the important items here is that these being taken 5 days before the failure, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks before the failure, could call into question a lot of things.
Like, for instance, I mean, what is this? Does this disprove anything?
Well, it doesn't disprove anything. I mean, what it does do is it could.
Put this into context for us.
No, I mean, basically, if the timeline can be verified, and as I say, photographs usually speak for themselves too. Photographs have usually a way of verifying when they were taken by themselves, be it people in the foreground or a lot of times images that are in the background. You asked earlier about the height of the reservoir when the photographs were taken. There are definite benchmarks. They know what height the reservoir was at certain dates in the life of the St. Francis. So that's the critical. They warrant a lot more investigation in them, because if that was the timeline, then why wasn't it mentioned at the coroner's inquest? It was never brought up.
You mean the fact that they were filling cracks?
That they were doing repair work on the dam 2 weeks before the failure. That would have been something worth investigating at that time. And then if there was a problem with it, obviously, why wasn't any word given downstream? Now, we're not at that point, obviously. But it does raise some interesting issues. And as I said, worth further investigation of the photographs.
Well, Laurena, anything else to add?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think you pretty well covered it.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us and for sharing these photos, these most fascinating photos with us. And Keith, you're going to have to put these in your computer, these little 2-inch by 3.5-inch photographs, and blow them up so you can get right in there and see what you're looking for. For more information about the St. Francis Dam disaster or Santa Clarita Valley history in general, visit scvhistory.com on the internet or stop by the Saugus Train Station Museum in Old Town Newhall, weekends 1 to 4. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Warden. Good night.